Zencaster's recording.
Good for Zencastr.
Zoom is recording.
Good for Zoom.
Good for Zoom.
Want a zoom, 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 and a boom, boom.
We're not doing that again.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining another episode of No Driving Gloves with me, Derek, and Will. How's it going, guys?
It's going all right. Will is obviously dead.
Normally, it's not just all right. You say something and then pause and then you go on about 5 more minutes. So I was just giving you your space there.
Obviously, he has nothing.
Wow.
I have nothing.
That's a first.
I have nothing. Whoa. Be a short episode. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And
that was awesome.
Join us again next week. Be sure to look us up on Facebook, Instagram. So let's jump right into this and see where we're at, what's going on. And
now, I want to know how Will's doing this week.
How I'm doing?
Yeah.
Oh, well, just a normal week. They actually got started on our new paint booth building that we were putting up. So hopefully in the next month that will be finished and the new paint booth will be in there and operating and painting cars in our new side downdraft heated Unicure paint booth.
Didn't you just build like 1 million square foot building and then you're adding a
million square foot? Oh Lord. We built a 40 by 60 storage warehouse. So, and it's about finished too. We got all the shelving up. It's got shelving that runs on their 12-foot by 4-foot shelves that run the entire 60-foot of the building, and the center's open where you can get 6 cars in the center. So, and then we're going to do a catwalk all the way around above the shelves.
So you built a 40 by 60 6-car garage.
Well, yeah, pretty much. That'll hold 6 cars and, parts of 6 or 8 others that are being built, in the shop. So,
and within a year, just a storage facility. Within a year, it's actually going to be another part of the shop. But right now, he's calling it a storage facility.
No, there's no way. I can't waste that much money in shelving and just throw it outside. Oh man. It's expensive.
See, obviously, Will hasn't walked behind his shop lately.
I have plenty of room to expand. If I need to build another building, no big deal. I am not landlocked by any means. So, one of the benefits to not being in Metro America.
That and the lack of permitting.
There you go. I think our building permit was, I don't know, $70, and it lasts for an entire year.
I think I paid $70 for my last one, and that was to put a portable building on my lot.
Yes, I wouldn't have to pay for that.
You don't have neighbors like me.
So,
but that's.
I really don't even have neighbors at the shop, so
I was going to say, let's get us back on the car topic, but I guess building buildings for your car is car topic. So,
yeah, there you go.
Well, I think in the draw the topics out of the hat, Ben, we drew show topics. Ironically, a show topic about show topics. But in prepping cars, what we do to get cars ready for various shows, if we're taking a car to a concours or taking it to a outdoor event or a racing event or a street ride event or displaying it at another museum or taking it to a parade, such. I don't know how many aspects we'll touch or talk about, or really what the diversity is when we actually do take cars out of Derek and I's discussion, museum or personal cars. And in Will, of course, taking client cars and representing clients at various events, or again, taking his personal cars to events, to more than likely to promote his shop, because unfortunately, correct me if I'm wrong, Will, being a shop owner means no matter what you do, it's always work related, especially when it comes to lowered cars on 26s.
Easy now. I ain't never put 26s on nothing. No, it's always work. It doesn't matter if you're just going to a local cruise night in your wife's car, or if you're taking a customer's car to compete for big awards.
I guess that's one of the drawbacks. People always come up to me and say, "Oh, I'd love to have your job. You got the greatest job in the world." It doesn't matter if I go on the clock, off the clock, whatever. If I go to any car gathering, car event, if somebody there knows what I do for a living, you always get asked and you always get approached. And I think we've had our whine about our job shows. You're, like you said, you're always working, and you're always representing who's ever signing the front of your paycheck, no matter if you're there in street clothes with, your beat up tempo. It's just you're always on the clock. So it takes some of the fun out of it, but it does open a lot of doors. So Derek's been very quiet this evening. Let's go ahead and throw the ball into his court and see where he tosses it back to. But how do you get cars ready for shows, whether it be one of your personal vehicles or be something from one of your employers, Mr. Derek?
So I have to go first?
You're going first. Your topic, your penalty.
All right. Oh, well, how is this my topic? Oh, because I texted about it first?
Yes.
Well, as you know, John, as you just said, and I'm sure Will experiences it too. Anytime you go out, especially with a car from the museum world, be it any of the museums I've worked at, you're always on the clock. You're always the face of the museum. So you're always trying to represent it in the best light. And you don't want, and one of my big things, and I'm sure it's come up on episodes before, I think we've talked about various aspects of our jobs, but I always want to make sure that no matter what event we're going to, be it a concours, be it a parade, be it a racing event, such as like the Goodwood Festival of Speed, you always want to make sure that that vehicle is running correctly. It's going to do what it needs to do, because really the last thing you want to do is have a breakdown or have a major mechanical failure in front of a crowd of people. And but I know I've said it in the past. I think when we were talking about, I don't remember what topic we were on, but educational value of especially early cars. Sometimes they just stop running, and it's nothing that you've done. It's not a major mechanical failure. It's just life of an early car. So, to get cars ready, we always try to bring them into the shop. I normally, if it's a car that hasn't been running in, years, basically in my tenure with the museum that I'm at the time, I usually try to give myself 2 to 3 months with a car. And that way I can really go through it, check things out, do all the necessary tests I need to do, go through the brake system, go through the lubrication system, just every single step of the way to make sure I know that things are going to go right when we hit that ignition key or crank start it. And, hopefully everything goes right and things run correctly. So, there's a whole process I kind of have developed and go through when I do these, and it depends on if it's a car, like I say, that's been running in the past, recent past, let's call it. And all we know, we know that all we have to do is fill it with fluids and just kind of do a quick check of all the systems, hit the brakes, make sure things are going right, there's no fluid squirting out somewhere, and pump up the oil pressure, and then we could get the car running all the way to, like I say, the car that just came off the museum floor. It hasn't run in 20 years, and we got to tear the oil pan off and check everything out and take a couple months to really get that car going. So there's kind of a deep process to go through, or there's a quick process to go through based on what the situation with that vehicle is in the collection. And then, of course, after we get the cars running, working the way they're supposed to work, and all that, we do all the cleaning too. We want to present a clean car, a car that looks good and represents the museum well at the event or show. And so, I mean, those are kind of the steps. And I mean, if you want, John, I can go even deeper. Do we want to get into every kind of step of the way? Because there are a lot of things we do, and I don't know if the barber does some of the things that I would do at the Henry Ford, at the Crawford, now at the National Corvette Museum. But I mean, going all the way into fully draining all the fluids and cleaning those systems out, doing a lot of times mineral spirits flushes in the transmission, the rear end, to get all the old gear oil out, get new fresh stuff in there. Brake fluid the same way. We're draining, pumping out the old fluid, putting new silicone brake fluid in, .5. That way we don't get moisture getting attracted into the system. All those kind of details too are really the way we go through the cars.
You have a much more formal system than we do. We select a vehicle, and and I know your facilities are the same, but part of what our claim is that everything we have on display can be made to run in an hour. Realistically, it's a couple hours on anything by the time you get it off display, a little bit cleaned up, some fuel in it. But with the kind of the regular rotation and the way we keep vehicles, and we kind of preserve them before they go back on display, we'll get a vehicle out. The reason we have a racetrack attached to our museum, and really the entire reason we have a racetrack attached to the museum, is being able to exercise the vehicles and make sure they operate. And it just kind of depends on what level of show or what level of exhibit we're going to go to. If we're just going to do a parade, we have say with cars, we have a set fleet of 6 cars that are always kept running. And basically you walk over, climb in them, push the starter button, turn the key, however it takes required to start, and away you go. Getting ready for, say, something like Amelia Island Concours or Pebble Beach, there's always months notice and something like that. So it's very careful decisions on what's being made. We know what is going to the show. And then we make very, strategic plans. We look over the piece, whether it be a car or a motorcycle or just whatever, and make sure, find out what's wrong, what needs to be improved, what may or may not fail. Like you said, if you go to, say, Amelia or Hilton Head or any of the concours and you win something, and we always go with the intention of winning something, the car needs to be able to, or the motorcycle needs to be able to start, ride, go across the podium, accept its award, and drive away with as little embarrassment as possible. You always see the cars at various concours that overheat while they're waiting in the parade line to go up and get trophies and that. And that's an issue with concours, is that they stage the cars too far in advance, and you do get some overheating. But there's nothing worse than vapor locking or anything. The vehicle has to run and operate. So we're a little bit more careful with that, making sure that, like I said, everything's correct, everything's updated, things on display in a museum, in a general public setting. Though sometimes pieces come up missing, scratch may appear, just little things you overlook. We make sure tires, especially if we're going to be demonstrating on a racetrack at whatever event, or even at our own events when we demonstrate things, it doesn't matter. We usually, I'd say splurge, but it's not a splurge; it's a necessity. Put tires on, because it might have been a couple of years since that vehicle, covered 5 or 10 miles, and with a 2.5 mile racetrack, 3 laps, 4 laps, you've got 10 miles on it. And we do push, even though we're on a display parade situation, you've got to do a good show. So you run the car a little bit harder than maybe just a gentle weekend cruise. So you've got to make sure the tires are set. And, it's going through making sure everything's correct, making sure that information on the vehicle hasn't changed. Somehow somebody's researched something and they found out that something should be blue instead of red, whether it be spark plug wires or whatever. You go through and you do a quick overview of that, do a quick checkout, and then I'll honestly say we probably spend more time prepping our trailers than we have to the cars, because trailers are always that forgotten thing. They're used, they're a tool. We use them. We take take the car out of them after an event, and then it just goes and gets parked in its shed and forgotten about to the next time it's used. And, it just gets loaded up, and we, make sure there's air in the tires and the tires are good, and away we go. We do have the standard safety kits, jacks and spare tires and that for the trailers. So don't think we're just, running blind on it. But I think a lot of time spent getting the trailers ready and getting some of the support stuff in place more than the actual artifact.
Yeah, and I want to jump in, John. I want to jump in because, there's some things I wanted to hit on that you just talked about. Trailers, working backwards from where you just left off. Trailers, always key. You're hauling especially in the museum world, you're hauling sometimes priceless artifacts, one-of-a-kind cars, things like that you want to make sure the trailer's always ready to go. And, that's a big part of what we do in preparations as well. But I'm gonna jump back to, you mentioned, and we try to have everything operational in collections. I usually try to use the term functional when I talk to people, because, as I always say, operational leads visitors to believe you can literally jump in the car on the floor, put a key in, hit the ignition, and it'll fire up. And of course, we store things a little differently than that in the museum situation. But I think the benefit of the Barber Museum and, say, the National Corvette Museum. When did the Barber Museum open, John? What year?
The museum, as we exist right now, that museum opened in 2003. The Barber Museum 501c3 came into existence in 1995. It was a much smaller facility in a different area of town, did not have the support racetrack and that. But effectively, you can say 2003 for the complex that everybody knows.
Right. So the point I'm getting at is the collection's a relatively new collection of vehicles. It's been since the 90s that it's been, let's say, been really being heavily collected for. Same with the National Corvette Museum, opens in 1994. Whereas, I talk about cars that haven't maybe run on the floor in 20, 30 years. That was a big issue at Henry Ford Museum and the Crawford. Henry Ford Museum, the collection started in the 1920s. The Crawford, it started in the 1930s. And there were cars on the floor that I knew had not run in 30 years in some cases in those collections. And at that point, that's where, we love to say that, we can have the cars running, 98% of the collection is operational. And as you say, John, it is true. You just have to give us time to work through the collection and get those cars ready to run. And then they are at that point where, day in and day out, or year in and year out, we can pull them off the floor, go through them in a few hours or maybe a day, and have them up and running and ready to go. And one benefit of, say, the Barber Museum, the National Corvette Museum, or Henry Ford Museum, I'll lump that in there as well. Barber and National Corvette Museum, we do have the good fortune of having the racetracks connected essentially to the museums, and we are able to run the vehicles on the tracks, make sure things are going right with them. Henry Ford Museum, the great thing there was we could actually take a lot of the cars out into Greenfield Village essentially after hours. And we basically had, blocks and miles of various streets that we could drive around on inside the village and test the vehicles that way as well. So, that is beneficial. And that's kind of, I think where we're headed with this is in the museums, and it's a big misunderstanding, I think, that the general car world has, is that museums don't take care of the vehicles, automotive, collections they have, and the cars just go there and die. And it's not the case. John and I both. It's about having the collection ready to operate and ready to go for these type of events so that we can go out, participate in them, and show the museum the collection and that specific vehicle in its best light.
So, Will, obviously, Derek and I are coming at it from a museum standpoint where our stuff is restored at some point in time, and maybe 10 years later we have to get out and use it. What's, what your stuff you build, I guess, and it's right to the shows, and then you send it home with the guy and you never see it again, right?
Yeah, it's pretty much the direct opposite of what you guys do. Yeah, we want to make sure. The biggest thing, like Derek said, in one of the very first things that he mentioned, was everything needs to be ready to go. You don't want to show up at a show with a car that is not fully operational and operating correctly. And that's one of the things that's really tough on our end, because generally we're finishing the car the night before it's going. And to be honest with you, most of the time they're really not finished at the show. They're just show ready. They're not nowhere near go home ready or road ready or anything like that. I'm just going to use this gold 32 Ford that one of the last bigger cars that we had out. We finished the car basically the morning that we left to go to Nashville for the Good Guys event. The award that we were competing for was Good Guys Hot Rod of the Year. Well, Hot Rod of the Year, you debut the car there. Well, it don't have to be debuted there, but you show up at the show, and then you go on a 100-mile cruise through Nashville during the middle of the day on a Friday. So right before we left, I put 2 miles on the car. That was all I had on it. So you have to really put a lot of trust in your ability to really just shake a car down sitting in the shop in situations like that. Lucky enough, when we did that, we didn't have any problems at all. I mean, we showed up and we did our 100-mile cruise. We stopped you had certain stops you had to make, and they put a sticker on your windshield, and then you had to make a pass down the drag strip, and the car performed. I'm not going to say flawlessly, but it made it through it without any trouble. So that's one of the nerve-wracking things about prepping for a show like what we do is, and that's not every time. That was just one incident there. And then we got other shows that we go to where say the car's been finished. It was shown 2 months before, and we're going to another show. It's a little more relaxing. You know what the car is going to do. You know what it's not going to do. And the Good Guys operates a lot like y'all are talking the Concourse does, where if you do get an award, and like you said earlier, John, we don't show up expecting not to get an award. We show up expecting to get awards, especially with a fresh build. Now, if it's a car that's a year or so old, we're not expecting anything. But just like Columbus Good Guys, their biggest event, they give out, I don't know, 100, 150 awards. And if you're in the back of the line, that's a long time to wait and sit there and idle, and it's always hot. Oh my goodness, it's always hot in Columbus. So you better have confidence in your car that, it's not going to sit there and run hot. You can idle up through there and everything's going to be fine, because there ain't nothing more embarrassing than getting in front of that crowd to get your award and, your car run hot or, something goofy happen. So yeah, that's number one. You got to make sure that your car is ready to live up to the hype that you've created around it. It's got to be clean. Everything needs to work. One of my biggest things about everything working is you want to show that car off. So if a potential customer comes up to me and is like, "Oh, how does that work?" You need to be able to show them, and it worked properly. So, and if you go to a show like the Detroit Autorama and you're competing for the Riddler, they judge your car open, hood open, doors open, deck lid open. They judge your car, closed up. And if there's something really cool that you did that's a custom touch, they want to see it operate. So one of the crazy things on the Green Dart was the quarter glass. I know it looks really simple, but the car was shortened 2 inches there in the quarter panel, and the roof was wedge cut. And we actually made the quarter glass larger than it was on the factories, because we had the seal on the quarter glass, not on the door glass. So the glass was actually a good bit bigger, and we wanted to show them how that operated, and they were pretty impressed by stuff like that. So that's one of the big things. Everything needs to operate properly. And then our trailers are always right behind the shop. We have a covered awning that they sit under, so they're not in the sun. You're not worried about tires dry rotting or rain sitting, them leaking or anything like that. So, but we always have a DOT inspection done on our trailers every year. Check the brakes and make sure nothing's broke. And so they're always sitting back there rocking and ready to roll. So I do the trailer maintenance just so it's just a peace of mind that if something comes up, because I never know. I mean, I've got guys that I've built cars for all over the eastern side of the United States. If they call and they're like, "Hey, Will, something's wrong with my car, blah 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 blah," I want to be able to go get it. I like doing the maintenance on the cars that we built. So, trailers are sitting there ready, and each trailer has a cleanup bag It has jacks. It's got jack stands. It's got a tool kit, so I don't have to worry about loading all that crap up. When I get ready to go to a show, I throw the car in the trailer, hook up, and I'm gone. So it just cuts down on a lot of confusion and a lot of checklist and crap like that. Just put it out there and you're ready. That's pretty much the gist of us getting ready for a show. Just the car needs to be clean, car needs to be fully operational, trailer needs to be ready and clean, truck needs to be ready and clean, and just get it ready and go. One of the things that I'm kind of OCD about is when I go somewhere, if I've never been there before, I want people to think that I've been there before. Just I'm not standing around looking with my thumb up my butt, figuring out what's going on. So I do a lot of research on what awards are going to be given away at this show. Where's trailer parking at this show? How far is my hotel room from the show? How do I get from my hotel room to the show? If traffic's backed up, what's an alternative route? So that's one of the things that I do that most of the guys in the shop don't realize I do is I really research where we're going, what we need to do. I even research restaurants, where we're going to eat at. That's just less stuff you have to worry about once you get there. Because if you're debuting a car there, you never know if you're going to be, asked a magazine to shoot your car, or Scotty D wants to shoot it when we're going to shoot it, and a lot of that plays by the weather. So you need to be prepped in every way, shape, and form. So if something does happen, it's not chaos. You just move on to the next step and keep on rolling.
Well, I'm gonna say something here, and and maybe it's a gripe about car shows, mainly or namely possibly some of the concours, but it sounds like Will has this problem too. And something I've found, especially at the concours, because I've spent some time obviously at those, mostly with very early cars, is I think sometimes, no matter how hard we prep the cars, I mean, especially when you're dealing with a horseless carriage or brass era type car, I feel like some of the car shows, concours, don't always think ahead or plan out for those type of vehicles, because there's nothing worse. Those cars just don't like to cool unless they're actively driving down the road. If they're set up as they were from factory originally, a lot of guys will add like an electric fan behind the radiator or something to try to make more air move, especially when it's just sitting. But it's very common for those cars, especially large engine early cars, just to be sitting in a hot environment to overheat very quickly. And it drives me crazy that no matter what you do to prep them, if you're sitting there with, even if you get retard the spark so you're not getting a lot of stress on the engine from sitting idling at an advanced spark position, they're going to overheat. And it's one of the things that I feel like no matter how hard you prep, I wish the concours and some of the car shows would prep as well, to make sure that their attendees can move their cars quickly through a line, get them onto the field, into position. If you're going up to the awards, it's a quick process of start the car, move the car up, maybe have one or two cars ahead of you, and then go through, pick the award up, and move on. So I think flipping this, I'd like to go from, we do a lot of work to prep the cars for the show, it'd be nice to see the shows do some more prep in thinking about what type of cars are coming to the show and how they can make life better for them, for those vehicles and their owners while they are at the show. And I'm just going to throw one thing in here. I know John's already said, the Barber Museum goes to a show, hoping or anticipating the possibility of getting an award. Obviously, Will, you're a hot rod shop doing some extremely incredible work, and you guys are always anticipating that award and getting that award-winning car. Kind of the museum world I've been brought in, or brought up in. I don't know if that's the right word, but when we take cars to a show, be it at Henry Ford Museum or at the Crawford, now at the Corvette Museum, we actually typically go. I actually mark non-judged on the application form, and we're there just to support the show, be an educational component to the show as a museum. And I feel like museums, we're not really there. We're not striving to get an award. The awards are really for the guys that either the shops that are building the cars and restoring them and hot rodding them, or it's for the guy that has restored the car at home and does the best job he can and wins an award. So in kind of the museums I've been in, we typically don't go for the award. We go just to be there and support the event and be an educational aspect within the show.
Yeah, when we do local shows and smaller shows, we elect to not to be judged or picked for an award or something like that as well. And we go to the bigger events. Our customers really enjoy the competition, and I do too. The competition's what's fun. It ain't necessarily if you win or not. It's just seeing what else is out there and just kind of being in that area while the picking or judging is going on. There's just kind of a cool air about it. And talking with the other builders and their customers, and that's, to me, that's what I get enjoyment out. And I tell my guys that work for me, we're not going to shows to win awards. We're going to shows to win customers. So if we don't win, don't let it bother you. It's not the end of the world. There's been more times probably than not where the best car at the show didn't necessarily win. And it's just, that's just how this works sometimes. Especially when it's more of a picked award than a judged award, because the guy picking, whoever he is, or he's going to pick stuff that he likes. And if you didn't build something that he liked, you may not get an award. And that's just how some of it is. So it's not about winning awards to us, but it's a little icing on the cake, and it's really good for the customer that we built the car for. They kind of look at it as like, you know what, that's almost worth it. So, do y'all generally compete, John, or y'all just there for more of a exhibition type of thing as well?
It really depends on the event, the invitation, how everything's going. Take, for example, we've went to Amelia Island in the past, and we've been invited to, say, fill up the pick a nationality motorcycle class. And they specifically ask, hey, can you bring this motorcycle and this motorcycle and this motorcycle? Because they want to fill the class, and they know exactly what we have and what they want in that class. But then we might actually take 3 more motorcycles. So we'll quite often take just exhibit only and pieces to compete with, depending on if we go to the Lotus Owners Gathering. A lot of times we won't enter that car in the judging. There's People's Choice, but we won't enter any of the concours classes and such there. That's not, we're there to support the event and support the club. We're not there to go home for a trophy. But if we're going to Pebble Beach and we've been invited, or we requested to be there, yes, we're going, and we're going to attempt to win. I guess it just really depends on the situation and why we are there. Sometimes it's to promote the museum, sometimes it's for educational purposes, and sometimes it's to compete to win a trophy. We went to Pebble Beach the first year. They opened a class for motorcycles, and we went with the intention of winning that class. The bike we showed was for that purpose, was actually restored for that purpose, and we won the class. And then a couple of years later, we skipped the next year. We went back again because everybody said, why weren't you there the second year? And we chose a different motorcycle, and it was refreshed. It had been a previous restoration, but we went back through it and touched on it, everything on the motorcycle, and we won the class. There was that intention to do that. It's kind of embarrassing, and maybe it sounds very arrogant, but when you are thought of as the best motorcycle museum in the world, or the largest motorcycle museum in the world, we kind of take it personally if we don't have the best exhibits, and winning your class helps feed that ego. But, like I said, it's not always about winning the trophy. It's not always about, the purpose we're invited for. We ask to be, or when we're invited to an event, we try to fulfill that. When we go to Goodwood, we don't go every year, but we go to Goodwood quite often for either the Revival or the Festival of Speed. We're not there to win anything. We're not there to get the fastest hill climb speed, fastest time on the track. If we actually, we don't vintage race, but we're there to support the event, and usually support the guest of honor, or the reason that our cars were invited, whether it was to honor John Surtees, or whether it was for John to drive our cars, or whether it was to, for Dan Gurney or something. Our stuff goes there for the purpose that's invited. So it really, like I said, it just kind of depends on the event, and you weigh each case on a case-by-case basis. And we're invited to a lot more things than we can go to, because we are a 501c3 nonprofit, and money is limited, and we have to look at the return on the investment. If we're actually going to, if we're going for promotional purposes, we know that, say going to Goodwood, if it costs X thousands of dollars out of pocket, even with an assistance package by them, we know we're never going to get that much money through the door back. But the exposure, and that people know about us, things like that, like I say, it's all a fine wire when it comes down to a business. Personally, if I'm taking a car to a show, if I'm going to go race, I'm going to win. Like I say, why I don't race cars, because I don't make enough money to win. So,
hey, when y'all are invited to an event, so Barbara's invited to an event, does the people hosting the event pretty well cover your expense? Hotel, travel, stuff like that? Or is that something that comes straight out of your guys' pocket?
It depends on the event. It depends on what they're asking for, and it depends on your ability to negotiate. Obviously, the event wants to get you there with as little out of pocket as possible. And obviously we want to go with no money out of pocket. And it's always a fine balancing act, and whether or not we can play, we can find advantages or disadvantages and scenarios that can help the event. I mean, we're not say we're invited to Goodwood. We're not going to say, hey, we want air freight on the cars, and we want or the motorcycles, and we want first class lodging, and we want tickets to everything. But we might say, hey, you're looking for this car, but we've got a car, we've got a car, say, at Classic Team Lotus being restored. And this scenario has happened, and we've told people about it. And they want the car at Goodwood. So the car goes from Classic Team Lotus in England to Goodwood, and that's its first public debut or exhibition. It helps out Classic Team Lotus. It helps out Goodwood. It helps out us. And then when it's done, Goodwood ships the car back for us, and we don't have any shipping costs, as opposed to them, potentially paying for a car to go there and come back. They're only paying one-way shipping. We're saving the shipping, so then we can send 2 people over to support the car, even if we pay for that out of pocket. And we're really not out any money, because it was going to cost us $2,000 or $3,000 to ship the car. So every scenario is different. And it really comes down to how well you can negotiate. If you're invited and they really want it, they'll give you more. If you're invited and it's just kind of a favor because you knew somebody, they might not. And I know some people that have just written great big checks because they want to participate in that event, and they're not invited. It's just a matter of circumstances, and it's one of the rules I live by. What's it hurt to ask? You weren't going in the first place. So if you ask them and you upset them to the point they say, well, you're not coming, well, you weren't going in the first place. And if you ask them and they say no and you're still going, what'd you lose? Then if you ask them, if you say yes, well, so you won. So never be afraid.
Is that basically the same for y'all, Derek, at the Corvette Museum?
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much the way of life in a nonprofit museum, in a 501c3. We don't tend to have large budgets for events like this, things like this. So Henry Ford Museum, at the Crawford, here at the Corvette Museum, anytime we get an invite to a concours, any type of car show here at the Corvette Museum, we do a lot of the Corvette shows that are around the country. And in a lot of those cases, with the Corvette shows, a lot of times we'll do it just because it's exposure for the Corvette Museum, but the clubs also support us. So a lot of the Corvette clubs in the U.S. are supporting clubs to the National Corvette Museum. So it's kind of our way of saying thank you to them as well for what they do. But when it comes to some of the concours, things like that, as John said, it's a case by case basis, and it's really about negotiating. They want you there because it also shows that some of the significant museums in the country are attending that show, which looks good for them. But it's also, we want to be at the show to be recognized as being at that show, but we don't want to spend a lot of money to do that because we don't have a lot of money to do that. So it's always that negotiating point that John talked about, where you just got to do the back and forth, do the dance, and say, hey, we would love to come to the show. We've got this car, or this car that we could bring. What fits best in the classes you're looking at? Oh, and what can you do to help us get there? Because we don't have the budget this year, or we don't normally have the budget to get to this type of show.
Yeah.
And start negotiating. And like John said, if they say, well, we can't do anything, we weren't planning on coming anyway in the first place, so no skin off anybody's back.
Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, there's a couple of shows out there that actually help us get there. They don't necessarily cover all the expense, but they'll give us a little travel money and give us a free vendor spot if we want it or something like that. So it's always nice when someone wants you there and they're willing to help you get there. That really means they like what you do, like you as a person, and like what you're bringing.
I was going to say that's kind of covers a little bit about show prep and getting there, and maybe even trying to figure out a way to get to the show for free, depending on the type of vehicle you have, or what you could play on the invite scale. I'd say on the flip, going more on that. Back when I was in the for-profit world, we would restore cars, and people would want to be in certain events, whether it be Pebble Beach or Amelia, and you end up helping them with the application process and that, but they do write the check to get the car there. They do write the check for lodging, and it's all out of pocket. So it's a little bit different depending on what you have, car-wise, what you're wanting to do, what the feeling of the car hobby is. One car I restored, we were the first car of this particular type of vehicle that had been restored in 25 years. And really, when we started to apply to put it into shows, people didn't know what it was. And today, if we were to apply to put that car in shows, it would probably be invited and be comped into shows, because over the last 15, 18 years since our restoration was done, that car has become popular again, has more than, I would say, quadrupled, but probably even went up 5 or 6 times in value. And I don't even know what the OOPL words are for that. But it's the whole hobby around that particular vehicle has changed from day one. And, that's a risk you take when you're breaking new ground in restoration, or the collector car hobby in general. You might have a perfect GNX, but nobody's going to comp that, because, to be honest, it's one of 500, and there's 500 more available to show. So it really depends on what the car is, what it, that's kind of alluding more back to that for-profit world, or the individual, where I think more of our listeners fall into. I mean, Derek and I, when it comes down to it, do have the dream jobs of being in a museum and being in the 501c3 world and the nonprofit world. It really aids you in a lot of negotiations, because there's benefits on everybody's side. And our mission statement isn't to make $1. Our mission statements is short. Both our museums have mission statements that are a paragraph long, but in short, it is to educate the public and expand the hobby. When your charter basically requires you to spend every dime that comes in the front door that year, you have a little bit of, I want to say, freedom. You have to be careful with it, because you can't spend more, but you have to spend every dollar. So do you disagree with any of that, Derek or Will? Or I think we might go ahead and wrap up this episode for the week. We're approaching that 60-minute mark again, I think.
No, I mean, I think it was a pretty good coverage of it, and maybe we educated some people on a few things.
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered everything. I mean, prepping, we might not have got into really deep discussion on actually prepping the cars.
Yeah, that could go
really,
on forever.
Going in there, that could go in, way too long. But a quick discussion on that. We talked about making sure your trailer's prepped, and then talked a little bit about going to the show and trying to weasel your way into maybe some help getting into the show. So I think we've pulled back the curtain on many subjects this evening.
Well, then, with that said, we'll thank everybody for joining us again this week for No Driving Gloves. Remember to check us out on the Facebooks and the Instagram. Give us a like, give us a follow, and be sure to tell your friends about the podcast. And we'll talk to you next week. Later.
See ya.
Later.